welcome. Welcome to our second panel on being your own publicist, a panel on marketing the work that one has published. Right now I invite our panelists to introduce themselves. If you could please say, your name and some information about what you published, what you're selling here, and any other tidbit that'd be helpful for us to know as we begin.
Okay, my name is Janine McBurdy, and I write all kinds of stuff. Flash fiction, novels, poetry, letters to the editor, everything. Book reviews. And today I brought a selection with me of the compilations. And what I do every year is take everything that I published or has been published that year and put it into a book and then sell it as a kind of like an anthology of my own writing. And so I've got like 7 volumes of the last 7 years that I've actually been marketing myself, and I find successful ways of doing that. And I'm always surprised at the end of the year to say, wow, look at all the stuff that I published. So if you ever say to yourself, gee, I wonder what Janine writes, you can pick up one of these books and you'll see everything that you can see online or in print volumes throughout the year. And I don't think I'm going to take up any more of your time. I'll let the next person go on, but stop by and say hello and get a free bookmark.
My name is Jeremy Zimmerman, spelled Jereme, not pronounced Jereme or any. I get that a lot, but
enough mead you won't care. Enough mead you won't care, right?
Yeah, it's happened since I actually couldn't say my name I couldn't say my R's when I was younger, so I'm over all that. But I'm not from Berea, but I've lived here I'm not going to give my whole life story, but I graduated from Berea College in '98, and I've lived in Berea. I moved away for a while, I've been here about 15 years, just live around the corner. And I write pretty much all nonfiction. I have 2 books out on brewing. So one is on making mead, which is a honey wine. Make Mead Like a Viking is the title. And I first started blogging under the pseudonym Redheaded Yeti. So my second book, which just came out, is Brew Beer Like a Yeti. But I also write for a lot of magazines, Mother Earth News, Backwoods Home, Hobby Farms. So a lot of my nonfiction is about how to do things sustainably. Kind of green living is the kind of umbrella term for what I write about. My first book came out about 4 years ago now, and I attended a similar panel as this in the process of getting that book out. And at the time, I had no clue what I was doing. I still kind of sometimes feel I don't. So what I think I can do for you here today is answer questions and just give you ideas on different avenues you can take. And I think publicizing is a little different for everybody. You kind of you find certain paths that work for you and you follow them, and et cetera, et cetera. So I've got my books in there, and I'm happy to talk to anybody throughout the fair afterwards as well. That's all I got for now.
They can't hear you. Yes, and he made a game too. But I'm Anna Maria Salvaggio. I've been an illustrator, writer, and graphic designer for 33 years now. Finally published author. Got my first book out last year. I've got 3 out right now. They're nonfiction. I'm working on a novel. It's been in critique for about 8 months, and I'm doing heavy revisions on it. It's a paranormal thriller, not romance, not Twilight. And a couple of children's books. My daughter's actually going to be illustrating one of them, so hopefully next year she will be here with me. She's hanging out at the table right now, but the ones that I have right now are about aligning your life to your joy. I'm an ADD creative hot mess, and so sometimes I find it very hard to focus, and especially when you're working and inundated with social media, and it's hard to kind of shut all that off and focus in. And these books are very easy read, very almost like reading a comic book, as they're hand lettered, they're hand illustrated versus text, and it's all about getting from point A to point B and keeping your sanity and getting it done. And I can tell you guys a little more about that too, but I do a lot of creative self-promotion as an illustrator, so that's what I'm going to talk about today too.
Excellent, thank you. For many of us, we know that it's been, 20 years since the face of marketing has changed, the face of publishing, the internet, the e-books, and a lot of it has been trailblazing, kind of re-understanding how to do this, how to go about doing it solo. And with that, there are a lot of obstacles that come, and so I guess what many of us wonder, or perhaps are daunted about, are obstacles. So what has been your biggest challenge or obstacle that you faced in self-marketing, and how have you overcome it? Or are you still struggling with it?
Well, I think the biggest challenge for any writer today is the realization that you've got literally billions of people that you're competing with. It's no longer just this market. When you're talking about the internet and publishing on the internet, you're talking about global competition for a readership. So if people don't know your name, if you're not Stephen King or one of the other hacks, did I say that? But, if you're not somebody famous and has made movies, how do you get your name out there for some sort of name recognition? Because why? You have to build that audience. You have to build a readership, just like any other retail store. And I think that's probably another big challenge, is understanding that as a writer, you're also a retailer. You have to promote you, and you are selling you as much as you are selling what you have written. And it's very difficult unless you come from a very wealthy family and have a lot of contacts, or are associated with the university, where publishing is, in some respects, more difficult and yet simpler. I think that's the biggest hurdle. How do you get people to know that it's you that's writing and you're good and they should read your stuff? I'll yield.
Yeah, I mean, I have similar things to say, I guess, but, I guess my initial hurdle was just knowing where to even start when it came to publicizing, and it clicked with me when I realized pretty much what, I'm sorry, remember your name, Janine. We only just met, so
Name
Janine
recognition
said.
and memory is the most difficult part.
It is, I mean, that is
It is,
building,
absolutely.
when I realized that I am the product, I mean, whether you like it or not, most, maybe not most writers, but a lot of us are insecure, asocial, we just want to sit at home and write and let everybody else do all the work. But you have to realize that your name and the books you're putting out are products. And once I almost kind of felt like I had to create a separate persona, which started to blog under a pseudonym, Redheaded Yeti, I think helped with that. So my introverted self is still here, but I kind of got out and just realized, especially on social media or just interacting with people, that you've got to kind of have call it a persona, call it an author's platform. I mean, it's got to be you. It's got to be genuine. But, as soon as that clicked with me and I let my introverted self kind of hide in the background, that, that helped a lot. Especially with social media. People like to connect with a personality, with a story. They don't like blatant, here, buy my stuff. You can do that, here's my book, buy it, but put a little something along with it. So I don't know if that directly answers the question, but it is kind of the initial hurdle of where do I start. And sometimes it's just stumbling in the dark until something clicks.
Fake it.
Fake it,
Perfect,
make it.
perfect segue. I am all about, my logo's a moon rabbit. Moon rabbit's compassion in Japanese culture, and I do a lot of charity work too, but I'm very much about jumping down rabbit holes head first and figuring it out on the way down.
Yep.
I used to be incredibly shy. Sometimes that will still, the people that know me are laughing right now. But I used to tell people I was jack of all trades, 30 some years ago in the beginning, and somebody's like, no, you can't say that, you can't say that, you're larger than that, you're a Renaissance chameleon. And so my business name is the Renaissance Chameleon, and I shortened it to Renmelian when I got the domain name, and Renmelian ended up being kind of a persona, nickname kind of thing, and I still have clients that will, past clients that'll call me, and Renmelian, how are you today? I'm sorry, I hope you don't mind, I just really love saying that, Renmelian. And it kind of gets me, past the edge and gets me out of my own head with, oh, I'm wondering what's going to happen, and this and that, and it's like, nope, here you go. So, but it is about being seen, and I know today everybody's so inundated with sell that I refuse to do it, and I'm more about sharing my process and letting people, making more of a personal, more intimate experience when they, want to talk to me about my work. It's, well, here's what you can do with it, here's how it can help you, here's, and I try to find any way to not say, oh, here, $10, kind of thing. But the biggest thing is whatever social media, don't let them tell you that Twitter's best or that Instagram is best or Facebook. Whatever the one is that you'll do, that you'll actually do, that's the right one. So just honing in on being seen and sharing process and interacting with people, I think that's your best way to kind of get past that. And you're gonna, the more personal and more interactive you are with your people, I think they spread the word for you.
Well, I would agree with the social media thing. I mean, I use pretty much all of them to some degree, but find one that you actually enjoy using.
Yeah.
So like Instagram was mine. I didn't even start my Instagram profile as any attempt to promote. I was just like, I'm gonna do this and have fun with it. And I've connected with people more on that one than any other. Facebook is good for creating events, for, it's got its own thing, but I mostly just kind of get on there and post and I go have fun on Instagram. And that's where I interact with people a lot more.
It's more personal.
So you don't have to use them all, but it is good to try and get your feet into all of them.
But to pick up on what Jeremy was saying in terms of communicating with people, and I really stumbled with this because I really didn't know how to do it, and that is to make personal connections with editors. When you're online and you're submitting your stuff, what I have found out is resubmit to the people who like your stuff. If they like story A, and they will give you good feedback on it, and they say, oh yeah, we really like this story. Well, guess what? If you have another, then send it to them. Because over time, you're going to build relationships. And let me just give you a quick example. Vine Leads Press. I sent them maybe 3 or 4 short, kind of like how-to things. They wanted advice to the writers on their blog. And I thought, well, I can do that. I'm always, I'm a mom, I can give advice. So I started writing. And when it came time for me to get a book published, a how-to book, I went and said, okay, I've written for you. Now what do you think about this book? And they published it. So it's like if you want to break in, you kind of have to pay your dues. And one of the ways that you do that is to build relationships with the different editors. And believe it or not, pretty soon you'll get to the point where you can read the guidelines, some of which are absolutely hysterically funny, but you'll read them and say, okay, let me target this is a Dance Macabre story. This I know they'll take. Or Mad Swirl. This is a Mad Swirl story that I've written. I know they're going to publish it. And 9 times out of 10 they will. And over time, they get to know you and you get to know them. And like any other, just like the mechanic, right? You get to know your mechanic gets to know your car, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, not yet, soon.
Right.
A few hours.
Or not. And that's how you start. And if they don't like story A, my gosh, they might like story B.
Yeah,
So,
don't give up.
relationships.
Yeah, start with one relationship. And, yeah, I would agree with that. First editor that liked my stuff. Just kind of goes from there and find another editor, and it can kind of spider web
And
out.
usually on their websites, they're going to list other sites that they like. So if they like your stuff, chances are they're going to like a similar publication that'll like your stuff. So it gives you leads in terms of where to market your material, because it is overwhelming. There are literally thousands and thousands and thousands of journals, magazines, e-zines, websites, blogs, newspapers, and you just, oh my God. And if you can kind of target and be led off into a path, it makes it easier for you.
Do your homework though too, because
Yeah,
you want to send
absolutely.
it to, you know, take a look at the publication and actually
Mhm.
make sure it's a fit.
If I could jump in really quickly, Janine had actually given this advice at a Berea Writers Circle meeting.
Right?
I followed it, and I'm getting my second story published at the end of April. So there is something very much to following journals that like other journals, and
Mhm.
reading the bios and where other people have been published. In terms of the savviness that we're talking about now in relationships and communication, what has been your biggest success when it comes to marketing? When we just talked about obstacles, what worked, what clicked, what made you go, ha, this is a product that is being distributed and sold?
Sold. Money. You get a check in the mail, you didn't get it. Sorry, but it's true. I mean, I absolutely was blown away. I had a story published, and I consider this my biggest success, other than the fact that you got a book published, which is all well and good. But I wrote a story, and an e-zine picked it up and read it. I went to a Canadian publication, and they said that they would do reprints. And I thought, well, I'll send it to them. So I sent it to them. They not only accepted it, but they sent me a check for $500. And I said, you know what? You know, this is a good gig. Maybe. You know, now I have not sold a story of $500 since then, because the market is such that you're lucky if you can get paid. You know, $15 here, $20 here, $40 bucks. And that was like unbelievable to me. I just couldn't believe it. But it does happen. So that's when you know that somebody likes your stuff if they're willing to pay for it.
Yeah, I guess I could kind of tack on to that. Mine, I think, and it kind of goes along with what you're saying a little bit earlier about, you know, checking one publication and similar ones, is I kind of found my niche and I found my voice unexpectedly. So I graduated from Berea College with an English degree in '98. Spent most of that time trying little bits of writing, and you know, mostly I got a job writing resumes of all things. Really, I still do that a little bit. Yeah. So you know, I was doing okay writing this kind of really dull technical. You know, I did a lot of IT resumes, and so point being, I was making a living, but it was not very exciting. I was still trying to figure out what else I could write about. And at some point, I just started blogging online about what became my first book. Was a mead, but also talking about how I grew up and how I was kind of going back to living, which was sustainability, homesteading, green living. So, you know, right around then is when suddenly people were like interacting with me and engaging with me. So I think once I found my niche, then everything just kind of spread out from there. And you know, in no time at all, I was going down to Mother Earth News Fair in Asheville, North Carolina, presenting in front of like 200 people, and I never talked to more than 5 people at a time. And that led to a book deal. You know, just point being, I spent a lot of time not really knowing what to do, and finding my audience, I guess, was the big thing. It's not always obvious what that is. Yeah, it wasn't what I thought I'd end up writing about, but so yeah, it's you can work toward that, figure out, but it's got to be something that people are excited and willing to read about. It can be something that's your passion, but a small amount of people are into it. So
Well, I
that,
have to say, you picked a wonderful time to do stuff about green sustainability kind of stuff. I mean,
well, and to me, it was how I grew up and
Yeah.
how I lived. I just called it living, not green living or anything like that.
right,
But how I grew up has suddenly become what everybody is
the
into
thing,
now.
yeah.
The last trends.
Have good parents, that helps too.
With me, I honestly have to say it was self-publishing. I have been working in and around the publishing industry since the mid-90s. I actually had started out early on, and this is kind of what prompted the book series that I have out now, but I knew I wanted to be a writer, and I devoured books. My mom could not keep me in books when I was a kid. But my first job was in a bookstore, so I was getting the freight side of it, the ordering side of it, the customer interaction side of it, the cover design and all that. And I had done published articles, I had done a lot of nonfiction work, I'd done a little bit of journalism, got in the newspaper industry, got immediately out of the newspaper industry because it's like, okay, I'm going home and like showering my soul every day. I don't want to do newspaper industry anymore. And that was before all of this fun stuff that's going on. But when technology really hit, I mean, we had the little green screen trash 80s in high school computers, but when it really started taking off, and I had gotten into a company that made computer-based training tutorials with the old 5 1/4 floppy disks, and I trained myself on all the software programs on my time off and my breaks and everything, and then started helping to edit the software manuals, and then got a job doing tech support, and being able to do things for myself with desktop publishing back then. Technology has really enabled us to be able to do things for ourselves, and being able to self-publish books and get them out there. It's not that I'm not, I've done the query letter thing, I've done the waiting for months to hear if you ever hear back from a regular traditional publisher. Now I'm publishing them, and if they come to me, fine. If they don't, I have a printed book that I can send with a query letter and say, I'm willing to do the work, I'm willing to do the social, here's the crowd that I've formed, here's what I've already made, what can you do to help me? And what can I offer to help, in return? So it's not about, to me, it's not about having to wait for a publisher to go through this big process and then have them come back and say, well, no, you've got to edit this. No, this is my book. This is what I'm doing. If you don't want it, that's fine. But, and the other thing is if somebody does approach me and wants to buy the rights to something, I don't have to sell them my digital rights. It's actually a separate thing. So they can buy print rights, but I don't have to sell the digital rights. I can keep those. I have author friends in Florida where I was up until 3 years ago, that they self-published their books. They were picked up by traditional authors or traditional publishing houses, and they kept their digital rights, because why are you going to add on a middleman, and then sold the print rights. So it's, to me, being able, having that technology to enable me to do things for myself that I wouldn't have been able to do years ago. That's been the most freeing thing that's worked for me. And I've been working with authors since then with the advent of self-publishing. So I do book cover design and do editing and help them get their stuff out now too. But I finally stopped taking clients and started doing my own, so I've got 3 now. But I wouldn't have had those years ago if I'd had to wait for somebody else to approve it. So.
I'm sorry. Digital printing?
rights. I think there are a couple questions about digital rights.
Digital printing. What's digital printing?
Okay.
Yeah.
Digital printing.
Digital printing.
Oh, okay. Well, what I do is I go through Create Space, which is actually now Kindle Direct Publishing. In fact, if you had a Create Space account and you log into it, it will shift you now. You have to move your stuff over to Kindle Direct Publishing. They do the print, they do the digital. The digital, you actually have to have another whole manuscript for it to look right, and I just did one for somebody, and it's a whole process. But I could have, like the first book that I did, Board, was hand-lettered, illustrated, and published in under 24 hours. Published meaning I submitted it for them to review and then get my proof back. So I had it out and straight to Amazon within 4 days, 4 days. Create Space, it was actually a few days before it got on Amazon, but now it goes direct. But you own the rights to your work unless you're selling them off. So Amazon doesn't own the rights to my work, I own it. The digital, with the digital press, the ebook and all that. If you're going to through a traditional publisher, they'll usually do first American rights, and then it's changed over the years. Be very careful if you're submitting work to journals and other stuff, make sure you read their terms, because a lot of them, you know, they want stuff that hasn't been published before, and they get the rights to it for a certain amount of time on some of them, and if you don't read it, sometimes they'll own more than that, and have the ability to sub-license to other. That's something I ran into recently, was somebody was like, you're giving us the rights to sub-license this, and it's like,
What does that mean?
means basically they've got permission to hand it out to somebody else, and it's like, no.
Oh, wow.
But I guess bringing it back, we were talking about the successes and whatnot. What we were hearing mostly from you were writing venues in terms of the marketing, but there are also non-writing venues. And I was wondering, and I'm sure many of us may be curious to know, what is the most non-writing venue that you have used?
Yeah, how do you mean?
Yeah.
So
As
for
far as
instance,
like promoting your work?
as far as promoting your work, like what is, because, you know, I mean, Instagram and Facebook, you are still doing some writing, there's still some reading involved, right? Did you go to a bar and leave your books at the bar? I mean, what is the most non-writing?
Well, I was gonna say, one of
That'd be
the things is going to groups like this.
Mhm.
Go to book fairs, and a lot of the conferences, well, my daughter can tell you this. I've gone to many conferences and left before they were over, because they were so poorly run, and it was just, they just wanted to sell you stuff, and so they create this conference, quote unquote, and the next thing you know, you're being sucked into a sales promo kind of thing, and it's no fun, and so I just leave. But going to venues like this, where you get to talk to people about your work, your writing, and they get to, you know, this kind of interchange, develops your public speaking skills. And if you're gonna market, and for teachers, they get, like, they have like a lifetime, right, of developing communication skills and public speaking skills. But for ordinary people who are scared to death to even get up in church and pray, let alone go and make a presentation, you have to learn how to do that. And no matter how scared you are, you have to learn how to do it, so that you can present your work. So venues like this or other writing workshops, I don't know about workshops, but definitely book fairs, I think, are a non-writing venue. I think that's what you were,
Yeah, I would agree, same thing. That was a big part of, you know, when I first published my book with a traditional publisher, one of the big things, they want, number one, that you're willing and able to promote yourself, and, at least in my case, be able to travel some. And, you know, the first couple things I went to, I'm like, yeah, but when you get in front of people, whether it's just at your table, talking to people or whatever, you realize it's just people just like you. Even if you meet up with an editor or a publisher at a conference, they're just normal people. They're not like, I mean, maybe some of them are a little daunting, but it immediately loosened me up a little bit. But the main thing, I think, to kind of tag on to what you're saying there, is it led to multiple other things. So making the networking is a huge thing. So you go to these events, conferences, and just, you know, there are so many things that have kind of happened for me just by going to even if it was an event that didn't feel like it did that well for me, if I made one good contact and got in touch with them and they were like, yeah, let's do something, it would lead to other things. So there's a lot of, I guess you might call it soft marketing or something along those lines. Networking. That's one of the biggest things, is just getting out, whether it be events, small events, big events, however you can do it, and just getting to know people. And again, that can kind of move you to places that you didn't expect.
I'm gonna dive in head first with something completely different, kind of, sort of, touching on that with being, like you were talking about, you know, selling yourself, that you're the product. It's, these books are coming out of my head, they want to see my process, this is how, you know, they get in touch with me and get involved, and the ADD part comes in, like with my children's books. I've got one called Clementine's Garden that's coming out, And the end papers, I'm a surface pattern designer, so I design fabric. The end papers are a surface pattern design, which I can also make into fabric. So I'm marketing it on spoon flower, which ties back into my book on Amazon because of the pattern. I've got stickers. I'm gonna make a cookbook that's gonna have clementine involved with it. And I've got stickers and I've got buttons, and there's libraries, I can do workshops for the kids, so there's different ways that I can tie, do a workshop on surface pattern design, do a workshop on, one of the things I'm doing is building out your book. I'm gonna be teaching that at Imaginarium later this year. And it's coming up with out-of-the-box ideas on how to get your public involved, get your audience involved to the point where it's like they're having so much fun, they want more. And one of the things, there's a licensing agent out of Boston in the UK. She handles all the companies that I want to be in, like Anthropology and Hallmark and all this stuff. But her thing is people buy your joy. People buy your joy. And that's why I stopped selling. That's why I started focusing on my joy, what makes me happy, because that comes out in your work. It's like they used to tell us years ago when I was doing the telephone job, people can tell if you're smiling on the phone. It comes out, it's the same thing. People buy your joy. If you're having fun with it, they want to be part of it. They want to get involved, or they want to, they want some of whatever it is that's making you happy. So I think looking outside of just bookstores, going to events. I go to the Comic-Cons. I actually run a fan group for the Firefly TV show called the Kentucky Browncoats, and that's actually put me in places where I can talk to people about my other stuff. And we did Scarefest the first year I had the group, and they had an author row, all the horror writers and everything. So I'm going to go in with my thriller novel later. And then Imaginarium is another conference, a big writers conference. We just did LexCon with the Browncoats, and they have a huge author area. But I'm also an illustrator, so I could do an illustrator booth and be able to do that with the book. So it's just tying in different products and unusual stuff that you wouldn't think of that would be, it's not just bookstores.
Well, and also, and I think this is a really good point about having other kind of products, and that is, you have to brand yourself. What kind of stuff do you write? Right? If somebody picks up my book, they say, they either like it or they don't, but it's a McBurdy story. And when people get to know you, they know that if they're going to read your stuff, that's you. And a lot of people, especially, and I hate to say this, but a lot of people that go to MFA programs in the universities, everybody wants to write like Hemingway, write like Chekhov, write like Stephen King. No, you write like you. Because why? If they want to read Hemingway, they'll go to the library and get the book out and read Hemingway. So you really have to think in terms of who are you? What kind of stuff do you write? Because that's what you're going to be selling. And if you write nice, clean fun, then your market is going to be the Amish or the Christian markets. If you're into bloody gore, then your market's going to be over here.
Scarefest.
But you have to know that about yourself and your material. And get a good logo, a good slogan, get a nice business card, and just like any other business. I think.
Well, I have one more question, and then we'll open it up to the floor. Okay? And we're talking about product. We're talking about marketing yourself as a product. Do you ever find the need to balance yourself as a product with yourself as a person? And if you do ever have that need, how do you do it? And if you don't, what is this surreal experience that you're feeling?
Transparency is the biggest thing I can say.
Yeah.
Is everybody wants transparency and being real and being yourself and being like Renmelian is me. I'm, jack of all trades. I do all sorts of artsy fart stuff and any kind of creative anything I can do. And it's just basically me having fun, putting more beauty and joy out into the world that I can, that my daughter's growing up in. If everybody comes along with me, that's great. But I like I said, I got away from the whole, you know, you need to do this and this and this and this thing, and it's like, permanent health issues, I might not be here next week. I'm not gonna waste any time. This is what I'm doing. If you wanna come along for the ride, then here I am. But it was such a total shift with that, because my lymphatic system shut down during my pregnancy 18 years ago, almost 18 years in 2 months. So, my next hurdle. But it just was like, it's whatever, I'm doing my thing, and you know, just being yourself. And the more I have fun, the more it draws people to, you know, hey, what are you doing? How are you doing? You know, the 3 books came out of me literally 3 a.m. couldn't sleep, you know, sat with the iPad, and next thing I knew I was like, hey, that's a book. So it's just being yourself and being real, and like I said, people buy your joy.
When it comes to your product itself, I guess that's something I had a bit of a challenge with for a while, and my best response there is just to say, just own it. Just be it. I mean, people like who you are as that person. And yeah, every once in a while I get, you know, somebody contacting me online or coming up to me and talking to me, and I'm like, they think I'm this like guy who's just lives in a meat hall and dresses like a Viking. And like, yeah, every once in a while I get people like assuming all these things about me, and I'm
And
just
cosplay yourself.
and I'm like, okay, if I'm that person in your mind, then that's fine. And you gotta be careful. It can be a good thing or a bad thing, but that's other part of your personality can become you, and I think I'm okay with it
I
at
will
this
make you a
point.
Yeti
But
costume.
Well,
go ahead. That's pretty much what I got.
well, I have a difficult way to go, because the stuff that I write, and I wrote this book thing at Danville Library, and I read a short story, and one of the ladies in the audience said, well, how did you come up with that? By experience, by thought? What? And so I said, well, all 3, and the lady said, yeah, but we expected a nice little grandma to say this, and you're not like anything like what this story's about. And it's like, no, that's a big hang up, and that is other people's expectations of what you're going to be. You know, if you write about serial killers, people avoid you. You know what I'm saying? It can get that bad, because people's expectations, I was a sociology teacher, so, you know, I get it, but it's very difficult to overcome. There are stereotypes. You know, is it okay for, let's say, well, I can't really think of well, let's do this. Is it okay for a 40-year-old white straight woman to write about a 16-year-old black gay man? Right?
Yeah.
You think about it. Is it okay to do that? Of course it's okay. You're the writer. You're supposed to invent stuff. That's why they call it literature. That's why they call it stories. That's why they call it fiction. But the reality is, you will get some journals that will say, we only want writers of this persuasion with identity. You have to face it. It's for real. You're not allowed to write about this stuff. You're not allowed to write about these ideas. There is a social censorship, if you will, that you're going to have to deal with as a writer, which makes online publishing so wonderful. And that is, they don't know who you are. They don't see you. They don't have that immediacy of judging you and saying, this is appropriate content for this person to write, and this isn't. So for me, it is difficult as a writer, because I would prefer not to be where people can make those judgments. I would rather be anonymous, and except for my name recognition. And so it's a kind of a tough line to walk in terms of the kinds of stuff that you write. And as far as marketing myself, oh yeah, you know, I was a teacher, so yeah, I'm marketing myself every day. it's no big deal. But in terms of internalizing that and personalizing the writing experience, no, I don't want to share that. It's my private business. Right? Go find your own creative process.
I've actually run into the whole judgment thing, because I've had people that have been, because I'm big, I'm heavy set, I don't fit the social norm of what's, considered beautiful, and so the speaking gigs are a challenge, yeah. I actually, because I'm bubbly personality and I'm a go-getter and everything, and then they see me and it's like, so it's, and I grew up before I had my daughter, I was 6 foot tall, slender, top belly dance for 13 years, so totally different persona, and there's such a huge difference and such a shift in perspective, and because they find out that, if they find out that I'm permanently disabled, they think my mind is too, and it's like, no, that's probably the only thing working. So, but there is such a shift in society's perspective, and that's actually been another hurdle with the judgment thing. That's what I thought of when she was talking about that.
Well, then I have one more question before I throw it to the floor. I think, we're talking about this. How have you all overcome it, dealt with it, punched through it?
I turned 50 this year, and I got to the point where I just don't care. I'm going to be happy, and I'm going to do my thing, and I'll find my own audience. They'll find me. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to have fun, sliding into third base when I'm 90. So, we'll make that far. But, and it's about, I've got a daughter, so I have that example and that legacy to leave on to her, and she has a very different concept of what beauty is, and has a very different concept of, color and race, and it's just all of it. So, but yeah, it is a hurdle, unfortunately. Society's starting to shift in some ways, but that's finding my audience was pretty much me, flipping the world off and just doing my own thing.
Well, right in this room over here, Dean Johnson, who I took a couple of classes from, he gave me the best advice I've ever received in my entire life. I was just starting out my writing career, and he basically said, write whatever you want. Sooner or later, somebody will like what you write. and it's true. You just write what you want, and then market it, develop it and all this stuff. You can go through all the hoops, but the bottom line is you just write what you like. If it's something you would want to read, you're going to find somebody who's going to want to read it too, or not. But, so that's how I broke through it. I just write what I like to write, and if people want to read it, fine. If they don't read it.
Yeah, throw caution to the wind, I guess.
Exactly.
I mean, that's what worked for me is when I just started.
Yeah.
And for a long time I was just writing just little bits of fiction and various things on my computer that maybe I sent to somebody, but nobody really saw. But as soon as I started just being myself online.
Yeah, when you started enjoying it.
Yeah, well, enjoying it, and it was the digital thing helped a lot. I mean, because most of the stuff was just hiding in my computer and nobody saw it. But as soon as I started getting on the internet, and I was interacting as a person.
But one thing I would like to add, and this goes back to what you were saying about marketing, and that is, it is an investment. It costs money. Don't let anybody fool you by saying that, you're going to get a book deal or publish your stuff and it's not going to cost you any money. It will. You're going to have to invest in stuff. Even online, you're still going to have printer ink. You're still going to have to, your computer's going to break. Whatever it is, there is a certain amount of financial investment you're going to have to make if you want to be a professional writer, just like any other profession. So if you want to take a class in poetry or something to learn something, it's going to cost you money. And is it worth it? Well, I leave that to you in terms of what you get for your money. But recognize that when you're, making things, and if you're into art, anybody that's ever been into art knows it costs a lot of money. Photography, an expensive habit. So writing is the same way.
Open it to the floor. I've had one gentleman who was very patient The questions?
I was just
And
gonna
then
make a
Go to you.
I was just going to make a comment on Janine's
Mhm.
comments earlier about reading one author or another. You have a voice, you know, and if people like your voice and what you're writing, they'll read your work.
Mhm. Another question?
Yeah, okay, so in recent years, I don't know, 10, 15, 20, something like that, all of a sudden, self-publishing and things of that nature have come along, all the digital, avenues that are available now. Where's it going? You mentioned, Rhea, that, it's now Kindle, so it's kind of gone away from Amazon, but not really.
It's still Amazon.
Where's
so-
all this stuff going?
You mean like
can
where
we
is it?
expect?
Trash heap in the sky.
Paper books are not, print book is not going, I don't care what they say, print books are not going anywhere.
Amen.
People will always
Yeah,
want to hold a print book and pass it down to their friends.
yeah, yeah, I'm not even slightly worried about that, they'll be here.
It's hard to predict if I could
Yeah.
chime in. I remember it was like maybe 10, 15 years ago, people were talking about how books were going to get shorter, novelettes were going to become more popular, right? Everything was going to go digital, paper books were going to disappear. Well, what ends up happening is because of streaming, with like TV, because of having digital books for some people, people have been binge watching TV shows, binge watching movies, binge reading, and all of a sudden now, books are getting thicker. You go to the store, the books have been getting, I mean, it used to be about 90,000, now it's like 95, almost 100. They've been getting a little bigger. And so it's hard to predict. It's hard to predict where it's going.
I think it depends on the niche too.
I think it depends
Genre.
on the audience.
Yeah.
40% of all books sold on Amazon are digital.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you, I mean, I buy a digital book and then I'll buy many, and then there'll be, you know, 2 or 3 that I'm like, okay, I've gotta have this one. And in my mind, I don't really have it until it's in my hand.
Right.
Yeah, it's
Right.
an investment.
Yeah.
I listened to the audiobooks for, Elizabeth Gilbert had Big Magic and Amanda Palmer's The Art of Asking, and I'd done the audiobooks for those, and I was just like, I love them so much, I had to have a print copy of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of a, you know, you decide, you try all this other stuff, and then the ones you really want to invest in, that you want to take space in your life, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm guilty of having books in my Nook and in my bookshelf.
Yeah.
Very guilty of that.
Yeah. Well, it's reference, you can carry it, it's easier to carry around than a 40-pound backpack.
But one of the things that you talk about, what's in the future, it really depends on if children start learning how to read again, because they're our future audience, and if you've got a whole population where people's attention span is approximately, you know, like 15 minutes, and they're done, which is, we see the incredible rise in flash fiction. And many online venues do not want anything over 1,500 words, or 750, or 1,000. And if you think it's easy to write flash fiction, think again.
No,
A lot
writing
of people
shorter
can't
is
do it.
harder.
It is.
Writing shorter is
But
harder.
if you can master that, and I must say I've had a lot of success with the flash fiction because my own attention span is not that good, so
You're
it's
picking your
really,
brain on that then, because the flash fiction's hard
but
for me.
it's amazing, and why is that? Because people are in a hurry. Well, we now have a generation of students coming up who don't read for pleasure.
Except for the homeschool students.
Well,
Mine's got as many books as I am,
even
and she
that
can't
is a
stand
niche
books.
where you can write for homeschool,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
parents, but anyway, that would be my prediction. It just depends on what happens with the readership.
You had a
I'd
question?
like to get something clarified. I published with Create Space, and on the bottom of my book, inside, it says copyright, and it belongs to me. What's the difference between copyright ownership and publishing right ownership? Is
I
there a
mean,
difference?
If, like, I'm with a traditional publisher and I've asked them the questions about the copyright and they're like, you know, everything that you've written belongs to you. Now you're basically almost kind of leasing it out to the publisher.
Now,
So
how
like if they go out of business or if your book goes out of print, you have the right to go ahead and find another publisher.
Then how
print
can
it.
Amazon charge $16 for my book?
Yeah, Amazon, I'm not entirely sure about.
Because they're doing your marketing for you. They're,
That's true.
they have the
Well, it's the
website, they have the
distribution channels.
advertising, the pictures, the
Okay.
access of
Yeah.
how to order it.
And it's the
That's where it
distribution
goes.
channels.
Yeah.
The distribution channels too,
Oh,
'cause they
okay.
have to go through
That
vouchers.
makes
So
sense.
you own the work, but the
Yeah.
publisher, Amazon, whoever is investing so much to get it out there and all that sort of thing. So.
Okay. That was great.
I try to pick up on people's cues. You have a question?
So we've been talking about how you yourself are the product in a lot of ways, and about how there are all these different markets within the market of being an author, and you find yourself producing bios and trying to sell yourself to other authors, and then you're also trying to sell yourself to publishers, and then you're also trying to sell yourself to the readers themselves. Is there any particular audience that seems to be the most important, or the place you should start?
Everybody talks about tribe and having, like-minded individuals, and I think that's, if you're doing social, like I have a specific group that follow me on Instagram, and then they'll go around and follow me on other things, or, if I have, that genre of creativity that whatever I'm pitching for, I'll focus in on like maybe 100 people, and those 100 people become my street team basically, and they go out from there. So if I'm being personable and building relationships with these people here, it's kind of like when you're making friends and they're like, oh, you really need to meet my other friend, you guys can get along, and so they become your, kind of your tribe and your.
Do you find that tribe is more can comprise more of readers or of fellow authors?
It depends on what I'm doing, what the project is. It depends on, like, if I'm doing stuff that's health related or managing ADD, then all my ADD friends are, or if it's, my children's book, then it's the parents. Or if it's, or people that collect children's books or that are more into the artwork than the writing, then that, so it just depends on what it is.
So it's almost like different streams, and sometimes
Yeah.
those streams converge. Like I've got writer, author friends who are genuinely fans of my writing as well, and the same with them. So a lot of times they combine. But as far as trying to look for where to go, which is what I think you're trying to get at, you kind of have to dip your feet in the various waters, and it's got to be organic to a degree. Like I was saying earlier,
'Cause then
I was
you're
stumbling in the
making-
dark for a while. All of a sudden.
But I think the key is to be flexible within yourself. And that is to understand, to match what you write and what your product with your audience. In other words, who do you want to write for? Do you want to write for other authors? Do you want to write for academics? Because you can do that. But if your goal is simply to sell what you write, to make money at it, then you're going to have to change your tribe and change where you market and change how you market, depending on what is it that you want to get back for yourself. And for me, my big thing is it's an immortality project. Anybody that publishes on the internet, as we know, once it's there forever. So if you get something published on the internet, that's your immortality right there. It's never going to go away, for better or worse. Well, if your goal is to win a Pulitzer Prize or the Nobel Prize for Literature, then you better get yourself into a college and, and hobnob with the academics and do all that stuff that people do so that they can get Pulitzer Prizes and Nobel Prizes. Nobody's probably going to ever win a Nobel Literature Prize for a piece of flash fiction. Well, I don't know, maybe they will, but probably not. So, you really have to sit down and think about the answer to your questions within you. What was it that you want? Because you can do anything that you want.
Thank you very much. That was very nice.
Well, thank you. I invite all of you to please continue the conversation and I still don't know what to call it, the next room. I don't want to call it
Community-
sales floor.
community room.
The community room. The authors. I'll come up with something else. Hang out, the authors hang out. But please, and if you have any more questions, come, look at their works, look at their books, get a good sense
And
of
I
what
have
the
a
marketing
handout for
is.
anybody who wants one, kind of like the shorthand kind of notes kind of thing. And be sure to get your red hot copy before they're gone.
And come get a button, we can have buttons.
So thank
Get
you very
going, we
much.
got this.
Jeremy, I just have to read your